Last week was dramatic and it ended in a thunderstorm. Then the sun came out over the weekend and the temperatures rose. But for our wrens, enough was enough.
Yes, it was chocks away for our wrens, but they were the lucky ones because it was shocks away for some of our other species.
And I've also hit the road to visit a region where nature has bounced back in a big way.
So come rain or shine, clouds or blue sky, we'll make you feel like you've got the joys of spring because it's time for Spring Watch.
Hello and welcome to the second week of Spring Watch 2018, coming to you from the Sherborne Park Estate, National Trust, heart of Gloucestershire, 4,000 acres, I'm going completely the wrong way, 4,000 acres. 4,000 acres, 4,000, well, I was going the wrong way. 4,000 acres of marvellous farmland that we've got up here. Honestly, last week was so good and we started off so poorly. Now, I've started off so poorly. What was good about last week? I'll tell you what was good about last week. Tree slugs. Tree slugs. Yeah, Attenborough 0, Spring Watch 1. We can't promise you more mollusk up trees this year, but I think we've got some pretty good stuff coming.
Of course we've got some good stuff, and this weekend there's been plenty of comings and goings, and I don't just mean the wildlife. Last week we had Steve Backshall. This week we have the one and only, the fabulous Yolo Williams.
Hello both.
Great to have you with us. Of course, you know, you've been a member of the Spring Watch team for years. He's a legend and his knowledge of British wildlife is phenomenal.
Do you know, that's the best introduction I think I've ever had. Thank you very much indeed.
Are you paying cash or cheque?
Cash.
Yeah.
Strictly cash only. And I have to say, I feel like, you know on Doctor Who, when a new doctor comes along, metamorphoses one Time Lord into the other. Last week, Steve Backshall. This week, Yolo Williams.
So does that mean you're going to turn into a woman?
I'm looking forward to that. Yes, I am.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that too.
If you were watching our show last week, you'll know that we went out with a storm on Thursday night. In fact, not just Thursday night, Thursday afternoon. We had 3 tremendous downpours here, and many of our birds were less sodden and wet. Going into the night, some of them took shelter. Out on the badger set, though, it was all thunder and lightning. Badgers nowhere to be seen. They're not crazy. They're not going to come up and make a live TV programme. They're snug in their set there. But we were really worried about our goldcrest, this tiny, fragile little nest strung up in the spruce, made of spiders' webs. When we looked at them on Thursday night, they were drenched. Could they possibly have survived?
Well, let's have a look live at that nest right now. I'm pleased to tell you, yes, they did survive. Now, this is a nest that's out in the open. As Chris said, it's really open to the elements. And you think those little birds are tiny. They weigh the same as a 10-pence piece. So we're really, really pleased that they've all survived. All 8 chicks have been seen flapping and stretching and doing well.
On the way home on Thursday night, I thought those goldcrested had it, to be quite honest with you. When we left them, they were drenched. They were tiny little birds, like you say, absolutely drenched. Another nest that we had, which was really wet, down on the ground, our willow warblers. Did they make it? Let's go live and have a look. Here they are, and you can see there's some activity there. You've got to peer into the dark heart of the soul of these birds there. But look there, you can see one of the youngsters is there. You can just see the eye on the bottom left-hand side of the cup. Bit of fidgeting going on inside. And in fact, they are all still going strong.
And the marsh tits, a bird you'd expect to do a little bit better because he's in a hole in a tree, of course. Predictions, you predicted they'd fledge on the Saturday, you predicted they'd fledge on the Sunday. Sat at home on my sofa with a cup of tea, I predicted 4:59 a.m. Tuesday morning.
Oh, did you?
And they're still in there. Look, they're still in there, getting ready to go. They've set their alarm for tomorrow morning, first thing.
I think you're right, actually, because they're quite squashed in there, and I've been seeing they're climbing over each other to get out. But you know, when I said marsh tits, I actually meant wrens.
Ah, right.
I actually meant the wrens would go on Sunday.
It's easy to mix up between
very
those two.
easy to mix up. And that's exactly what they did do. And if you were watching our live cams over the weekend, then you would have seen this. In fact, they tried to go on Saturday. One brave little soul ventured out, but decided that that nest looked far too cosy with all the other chicks in, and it hopped back in. That's what you call semi-fledging. It was on Sunday at 4:36. just before the sun came up, in fact, that the first one hopped out, followed by a second one at 5:22 and 8:13. So that's 3 of them out the nest. The other 4 sort of all tumbled out at just after 9. So that was all 7 of them successfully fledging that nest. And I've got to say, I'm rather sorry to see them go, because that was one of my favourite little nests. I love the little faces poking out of that nest. Look at that face. That's a chick saying, Mum, I'm out, but please feed me. And that's exactly what the mum will do for at least, 8 to 14 days maybe. And it's likely that that is the mum, because the dad has probably already gone off, found another mate and set up another nest.
The blackguard.
The blackguard, hey?
Absolute bounder. Cad. Blackguard. There's fledging in process as we speak. Just before the start of our programme this evening, we saw this. One of the blackbirds nesting in the barn near the studio decided that although it's late in the evening, it would take an early flight. It's hopped down, and you can see it there on the left-hand side of your screen, perched on one of the rafters in the barn. It stays there briefly before it then hops down and makes its way towards the entrance of the barn. Here it is. Now, this is the wrong time of night to be heading outside. Really, he should be, or she should be staying. Oh, there he is. Here she is. She's just gone outside. Can we go live now to the blackbirds? What's going on live?
Do you know what I'm worried about, though?
Oh,
Is
look.
that little owl.
Here are the parents.
And they're trying to scare off
They're
the
both
little
chasing
owl.
it, aren't they?
Because this is what we're concerned about, isn't it, Chris? Once those chicks fledge, they're bite-sized for the little owl. So we're going to keep a close eye on that throughout the evening, and fingers crossed that little owl, that little blackbird will be okay.
Well, there's 3 more in the nest, and
Yeah.
they are right alongside the little owls. And this is when they're
Jeopardy.
going to be at their most vulnerable, when they're out of the nest and can't be guarded so well by the parents. Now, if you're watching last week, one of the most popular nests that we were following was an exotic species, the mandarin duck. These were brought in from China. They've established themselves across the south of England. They have a nest here at Sherborne in a hollow oak tree. Here's the female turning her eggs, but if you look carefully, one of those eggs had a little crack in it. That was last night, and this morning at 4:54, she appears to give birth. Radical for a bird, but in fact that youngster's hatched and has just made its wobbly way out into the slightly wider world of that cavity. And by 5:30, another one of these chicks is hatching there. Remember, we think that she's got as many as 15 eggs, and she won't be leaving the nest with any of those young until they all hatch. But they were certainly making progress this morning. This one is hatching in front of there, using a slightly new technique to get out. It's got its little paddle foot there on its back. It was stuck, but no harm came to that one. And here, a little later, she appears to be turning the egg, but inadvertently this helps the hatching process. As you can see, this one tumbles out there. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And there that she's nibbling at something there, we've noticed that she's been eating all of the membranes that were left inside those eggshells. Can't waste any protein at all.
Oh, look at that!
Oh,
Oh, no,
stop
come on,
it.
that's gorgeous!
Stop it. Let's go live to the mandarin now, see if we can see how many of them hatch. That's the exterior. And there's the interior, so she's not there at the moment, which does give us a chance to try and count these youngsters, although it's quite difficult as they're all huddled together. It's not very warm here this evening at Sherborne. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9. It's quite difficult in the black and white fluff of the interior of that nest. My prediction for fledging is tomorrow morning. Not that they have a lot of choice. When these birds hatch, they retain some part of the yolk, if you like, from the egg inside their body, and that keeps them going for the first few hours. But after 24 hours, she's going to have to lead them out so they can begin to find some food for themselves. So I'm saying 8:30 tomorrow morning.
7:24.
6:30.
6:30?
Yes,
There we are.
they'll be off early. They're really keen to go. If you've not been watching them, they're so keen to go, those chicks. So I think as soon as the light comes up, they will be
7:24,
off.
mark my words, 7:24. And badgers. Badgers have been very active. Badgers, of course, love the rain. They can dig around for earthworms, for grubs. But this is interesting. This is it. We recorded this over the weekend. Initially, we thought it was a copulating pair, the male on the female there. But Chris, you've had a good look at this, and you think it might be 2 males sorting out a kind of hierarchical structure within the group.
Yeah, I mean, animals will false mount like this. Males will mount other males, or even females sometimes. You can see them anal rubbing there. They're anointing each other with their scent. There's no actual copulation taking place. And this is a form of one animal exerting its dominance over the other one. It's subduing the other animal. It's the more forceful, powerful one. And I think that's what's going on here.
And it ends in a little bit of play there as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So,
there was no animosity there. I think this is just a gentle way of saying, just remember, I'm higher up than you are.
Well, they may not be copulating, but you've been delayed by frisky badgers.
I have
haven't you?
indeed. In March, I was up in Scotland, driving along quiet little country lane, middle of the night, all of a sudden, copulating badgers in the middle of the road. And I stopped, and they wouldn't get off. They just carried on and looked at me like this. Then another badger came, they broke up, and they went their separate ways.
How inconvenient. How
Yes.
long were you delayed for?
About 2 minutes.
Was that all?
I was. Well, I thought it was pretty good effort, fair play.
Now, we're not just looking at the wildlife here in Sherborne, we're looking at the wildlife all across the UK, and Gillian's on a road trip. Last week she was in Shetland. You can see that's a very long way from Sherborne in Gloucestershire. She's travelled south over the weekend to Yorkshire between Leeds and Doncaster. And she's gone to a reserve that has been reclaimed, and it's become a fabulous place for wildlife.
Yes, I'm in North Yorkshire at the RSPB Reserve at Fairburn Ings. It couldn't be more different from Shetland here. We are in one of the most densely, heavily populated areas of the country. Leeds city centre is about 10 miles in that direction as the crow flies. Behind me, 5 miles to Wakefield, and over there are the cooling towers, the old cooling towers of the power station called Ferrybridge. Now, beneath me, where I'm standing right now, in all this mud here, when you crumble it away, you have the scraps and remains of what was a thriving industry here. Of course, this is coal, and this region fueled and powered the country. 20% at one point of this country's electricity needs were met by this region. The first miners got here in the early 1800s, and it soon became a hive of industrial activity. 200 years of mining produced millions of tons of coal, but also all this waste that you see here. This is the earth and the rock that had to be dug out of the ground in order to get to the rich coal seam underneath here. And this huge mound that I'm standing on is 23 million cubic meters of spoil. And from that industrial wasteland, we have this transformation, beautiful grassland and lakes in the background. And the really surprising thing about this area is that this transformation wasn't just started after the mining industry, it was started by some of the miners themselves. When they came up for air, they valued these little fragments of nature that they found here. They started planting up the spoil with trees, and in 1957 this was declared a nature reserve. By 1976 the RSPB took over, and this is what we see today. Beautiful, beautiful mosaics of habitats, lakes and grassland and woodland, and it is an absolute magnet. It attracts wildlife, particularly birds, from miles and miles around. You have the water birds that you would expect, swans, majestic herons, and all that with this industrial backdrop still there. At this time of year, spring is underway. We see, like here, the grebes with their chicks, and it really is a beautiful sight. It's not a big reserve. There's almost 800 acres here, but this little reserve has 274 counts bird species. That is the highest count anywhere up an inland site. Let's have a look, because there's some really predictable water birds that come here. We've seen tufted ducks, we've seen coots, we've seen moorhens. We've been seeing, as you can see, grebes, but there's some really, really, really surprising rarities here. Let's take a look at this, what we recorded earlier. Now, these are some real rarities. These are black-necked grebes. There are only 30 breeding pairs. They're only seen in pairs. They're diving birds. And there's only 13 breeding pairs in the whole country, and we've seen about 6 or 7, sorry, there's 50 breeding pairs, and we've seen about 6 or 7 of these birds here on this lake alone. And you can get a look there. We've also seen activity in the reed beds. There's tantalizing rustling, and that is what's responsible for it. They're not as rare as the black-necked grebes, but they are very difficult to see, and they are bitterns. And we've been afforded these beautiful sights of the female on her feeding flights just behind me in the reed beds over there, and she is almost certainly on chicks. So we have these lovely rarities. Later on in the show, we're going to bring you a real corker of a bird that's going to get even the keenest birders amongst you quite excited. For now, back to Sherborne, to Chris and Michaela.
Thank you, Gillian. Yeah, I've already had a cork of a bird. Black-necked grebe. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And I love it when nature takes over man's industrial waste. I mean, imagine being there years back when all of that was a mine works. It would have looked utterly trashed. But now it's beautiful and supporting some fantastic bird life.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? Now, last week we launched a really exciting new camera. Well, I think it's exciting anyway. It was of a maternity roost of lesser horseshoe bats that we have here on the estate. But we've actually been following those bats since last summer. This is what we've seen. This is what we showed you on Autumn Watch, but this is actually of last year's juveniles. You can see them tucked under their mum's wings there, all cosy in the roost. Some of them are clinging on to their mums, quite acrobatic and stretching their wings. So that's what we showed you in Autumn Watch. Then in Winter Watch, when they were in their cave roost, we saw the male trying to probe into a rather unwilling female, quite frankly. And then we captured incredible images, very rarely seen, of bats mating. And the reason that we've put the live cameras into their maternity roost is because that mating obviously will lead to babies, and we're really hoping to get a Spring Watch baby bat.
They will mate from September all the way through to April, but they hold on to the sperm and only use it from mid-April onwards. And then it's a 78-day gestation period, so we're going to have to hope for a very early bat. Let's go live to the roost now. So here are our bats. They've moved from the cave to the apex of this old dog kennel down in the village. When we originally came, we thought there were about 150. We've now counted no less than 300 bats. The vast majority of these are going to be females. There might be some males from last year's young mixed in amongst them too. And you can see that they're all huddled together there. I've mentioned it's quite nippy here at Sherborne this evening, and if the temperature falls below 30 degrees, then to save energy so they can put it all into the development of their young, the female bats will cluster like this and squeeze themselves together. We can take a closer look at these females here as individuals. There they are, clustered tightly, trying to maintain that temperature. And here, if you see these ones here, they do look quite plump. I mean, I'm not that familiar with the general body shape of a lesser horseshoe bat, but they look quite plump, quite gravid, I have to say.
Well, I really hope, fingers crossed, that we get a baby bat, or even that we get a live birth, and that we can name the bat. We could call it Billy the Bat, or Brenda the Bat, or Brian the Bat, or something like that.
Or tennis, or...
No, it's got to be a B. Don't get the joke.
Cricket, or table tennis.
Oh, I see, I've got it.
Difficult to judge the scale of those bats, actually, in there. But look, I've got a little cutout here, which gives you an idea of how big these bats are. So they've got about a 25-centimetre wingspan. And these eyes are not an accurate representation of those of the bat in any way, shape or form, but, you know, it gives you a sense of the scale. They're quite small bats.
And the Bat Conservation Society wants your help this month with their National Roost Survey. And if you're lucky enough to have bats on your property, they want you to count the number of the bats that are emerging on 2 different nights in the summer, and then obviously let them know your findings. And all the details of that survey are on our website.
Indeed, and we'd like you to visit that website as often as you possibly can, and get in touch in any other way, and this is how you do it.
The easiest way to reach us is to go online and be our friend on social media. You can like us on Facebook, adding your pictures and comments to our page. Follow us on Instagram and tag us into your photographs, or tweet us your questions at BBC Springwatch. And don't forget, you can watch the live cameras day and night at bbc.co.uk/Springwatch.
Okay, get ready for a pastiche. Not a pastiche, a pastiche. Get ready for some ridiculous costumes and some dramatic music as we put two birds to the test. Now, we've done it before. We did it with barn owl versus kestrel, swan versus goose, and then in Winterwatch we had Game of Crows. Well, now think Tolkien, think Middle-earth, think hobbits, elves and wizards.
The white-tailed sea eagle and the golden eagle. Both impressive predators and the UK's largest resident raptors.
It's the ultimate battle of the brawny birds. But which one will become the undisputed master of the skies and be crowned the Lord of the Wings?
This is Mara. Mara is a beautiful 6-year-old white-tailed sea eagle. She has this huge yelp. She can be hormonal and incredibly grumpy. But no matter what her mood, I'm backing this lady of the sea.
Well, my wizardy friend, you may have the beautiful Mara, but I have the stunning Stanley, a golden eagle, the iconic symbol of Middle-earth. He's 11 years old with a wingspan of 6'4". Stanley is an awesome predator with super sharp claws. And that's why I, the Lady of the Wood, am championing Stanley, the Lord of the Land.
The eagles are coming with the help from bird handlers Barry Blyther and Roxanne Peggy. The golden eagle and the sea eagle will be set 3 challenges, each designed to test which species is the supreme avian predator.
Challenge 1, Vision, the Fellowship of the Wing. Good vision is vital for all birds. But for these birds of prey, it's particularly crucial when soaring to hunt or spot carrion. From a mile away on top of a mountain, which bird will see the ring and be lured to the hand? First up, Stanley the golden eagle, the world's most widely distributed and recognised eagle.
Oh, he's up, he's airborne.
Come on, Stanley. It's just getting a bit of lift, isn't
wow, they're beautiful birds, really beautiful birds. Being mobbed by ravens.
it? Did you put that raven up?
I did, yeah, both of them. The 2 ravens attacking
Oh my
them.
goodness. I call that cheating.
All in the rule
That's
books.
your wizardly trick, isn't it?
He's,
Just not going
is
as
it?
well
Yeah,
as we
well
hoped.
done, the ravens. Look, see?
I think we've got to count it from when he stopped being mobbed.
He
Come
has
on, be
stopped
fair,
being
be
mobbed
fair.
and he's sat on a rock up there just looking. Here he comes, here he comes.
Whoa, look at the legs, look at the legs, look at the...
Look at that.
Beautiful, beautiful, Stanley.
That was stunning.
It was
That was stunning. Very poor eyesight, but good flying.
Seeing up to 8 times sharper than humans, eagle-eyed Stanley spotted the ring. But will Mara get her eye in to even things up?
The time of the elves and Stanley is over. Now is the time of the sea eagle. Come, my child.
Very dramatic. Those ravens have magically disappeared.
Here she comes.
You are a wizard.
The critical thing with eagles is movement. That's why Roxanne is doing this with her arm. If mountain hares stay stock still, likelihood is they won't be seen. Once they move, the eagle, golden eagle, white-tailed eagle, they zone in on you and it's amen.
She's going in the wrong direction. I hate to tell you this.
No. I think she just doesn't like your ears. I think that's what's holding her back.
I mean, let's be fair, we're taking the mickey here, but both these eagles do have incredible eyesight.
They are supreme predators.
She flew off in the wrong direction and... she landed.
Right, what's happened is that Mara has found food, some carrion, at that distant hill over there. So she saw that from up there, which Stanley didn't.
I admire you making all these excuses and not wanting to lose. But I do think if you don't get to the finish line, whatever the competition was, I'm sorry, but you just don't get a medal. Which means that Stanley the Golden Eagle has won this one. Admit defeat.
I don't think he likes losing, does he? I don't
No.
think he likes losing. It didn't go quite as well as we hoped. That little challenge between the two eagles.
Was it the ears?
I think the ears put him off. I think he was right. But let's just talk about eagles' eyes, because eagles, along with owls and falcons, have the biggest eyes relative to their body of any bird. If we take the white-tailed sea eagle, he has eyes 46 millimetres, which actually isn't, well, it's about the same size as an ostrich, but an ostrich is 18 times heavier. And that's important to note because an ostrich is a flightless bird. So eagles have eyes so big, they couldn't be any bigger because then they would impinge on their flying. They would compromise their flight. So if we relatively sort of scaled up their eyes up, it would mean that we would have eyes the size of oranges, which would make us look quite ridiculous, obviously, and you won't want to look at yours. But if we had these sort of eyes, it means that we could see an ant from a 10-storey building. I mean, imagine that, a 10-storey building, and we'd be able to spot and
You want to see an ant from the top of a 10-storey building for?
Well, you probably wouldn't, but, you know, you might be able to see, I don't know, you might be able to see
You're
little
distracted by
5
ants the whole time. Just be walking along the street, there's an ant over there.
But the eagles can spot a rabbit from 3 miles away. So, you know, their eyesight really is incredible.
It's difficult to perceive how they see differently from the way that we do. But from what we know of their anatomy, here's a reconstruction, if you like. So here is a hare in a field. And you can see the hare there. But let's crop in, and that's what it would be like if we cropped into the surface of our eye, that sensitive part, the retina. There's the hare again. Now let's crop in with an eagle-type vision. And there you see that the hare is pinned sharp. You see, these animals can't see any further than we can see, and they don't see things magnified. It's not like they've zoomed in or got binoculars or telescopes in their eyes. It's to do with the definition. The retina, the back part of the eye, the sensitive part, is covered with light-sensitive cells called cones. These are the ones that work in daylight hours. We have about 200,000 cones in our eyes, in each eye, but a golden eagle has 1 million, and that's why it sees a much sharper picture. But there are other anatomical differences as well. If you look at this cross-sectional area here of the eagle's skull, including its eyes, so here's the lens at the front, here's the lens, so here's cornea, here's the lens, and here's the retina, the light-sensitive part at the back. You notice these two dips, these are what we call the fovea. Now the fovea is a small depression in the eye, we have one of these, where there's a high concentration of those cone cells. It's sharper vision there, basically. In fact, there's no blood vessels, so that you get even better vision. But look, the eagle has 2 fovea. It has a deep fovea and a shallow fovea, and it can switch between the two. And what we see that it's actually doing is when it's out hunting, it can spot something looking sideways, and then it can switch to the shallow fovea when it's looking forward to judge how far away the object is. And this ability to switch between these two especially sensitive parts of the retina mean that the eagle can apparently be looking at 3 different things pinned sharp at the same time. One on each side, one looking out this way and this way, and also one dead in front of it, which is it can judge distance because it's got full stereoscopic vision looking forward. Remarkable. So it's difficult to conceptualise how that might actually look, but the one thing's for sure, their eyesight is considerably better than ours.
I wonder if it deteriorates with age like ours do. Interesting.
I should imagine it probably would. It certainly does in other mammals. We see all sorts of degenerative eye conditions in our dogs. They get cataracts, glaucoma, that sort of thing. So why not birds?
Going back to the white-tailed sea eagles, though, we're actually really lucky to have them in this country because 100 years ago they were wiped out. In the 19th century they were persecuted and the last one was shot in Shetland in 1918. And it's only thanks to 3 reintroduction programmes by the RSPB where they brought birds over from Norway that we're now lucky enough to have 120 pairs here. So this year commemorates that 100 years ago when we actually were, well, we had no white-tailed sea eagles. They were extinct.
No, I'm very pleased to say they're back. They're playing a very valuable part in the ecology of this part of the UK now. As an apex predator, they're responsible for regulating prey populations, and without these sorts of apex predators, obviously those ecosystems are not fully functional. But it's also the economy that they're influencing, and we have estimated that the sea eagles on the island of Mull, which is a hotspot for ecotourism, people paying to go there to look at wildlife, are worth in the region of £5 million a year to that local community, which is the equivalent of 110 local jobs. So eagles, great for ecology, good for economy.
It's a really inspirational and successful conservation story. And people get their wildlife inspiration from all sorts of places. And last week we introduced you to a Japanese filmmaker who gets his inspiration from Richmond Park in London.
My name is Yuzuru. I'm a musician, photographer and wildlife filmmaker. I came from Japan almost 20 years ago to the UK. I find seeing wildlife in Richmond Park is different to other parks. As soon as I look through the viewfinder, I'm actually in their world. As the season progresses towards summer, it's very beautiful and it can transform itself to an amazing, almost fantasy-like landscape. When I see the fallow deers, they're very beautiful looking deers. The patterns on their bodies and the colors, they look more like Bambi. You see things that you never thought you would see. I'm actually there in the nature and feeling it and observing and even smelling of the grass, listening to the sound. As I walk, I look around. Sometimes I'll find the kestrel hovering before I find the deers. The next moment I may find cygnets swimming after the parent. Or it could be deers in spring growing new antlers. The light in spring starts to become slightly harsher than in the winter, but at the same time it adds the warmth and makes the whole scenery lively. A lot of birds will be mating, so there is the energy of a new season is coming. Jackdaws would collect the fur from the back of the deers. The kestrels become more territorial when they're nesting, especially against the jackdaws. And in the lakes, the swans are very territorial, so sometimes I see them chasing all the other birds come near. In the nature there's no right or wrong, whereas we see things with what it should be, shouldn't be, and we have structures almost imposed our lives by the society. Seeing them frees me from that limitation in my mind. Sometimes I don't realize how the time is going by, and often I end up leaving the park when it's going dark.
I have to agree with you, Zuru, there. There's a wonderful old Welsh saying, it's lle I enaid gael llonydd, a place for the soul to find peace. And it refers to those wonderful, quiet areas full of wildlife, places we should all escape to once in a while. And I've escaped to the farmland. Classic English farmland here, a mosaic of fields, hedgerows, stone walls, woodlands, rivers and streams. And I've actually come here to look for farmland birds. Now, earlier on, it was a lovely warm day. There were birds everywhere. We did see a barn owl, believe it or not. Here we are. This is the barn owl hunting here. Saw that earlier on. But a lot of the farmland birds, because it's gone quite cold now, they hunkered down in our hedgerows, in the fields, out of the way. They're much, much wiser than we are. And if you are coming out here bird watching, scan all the time. Check the trees, check the walls, check the hedgerows, and use your ears as well. It's nice to come here in spring, because when we were here in winter, a lot of the farmland birds, they behave differently at that time of year. The seed eaters in particular gather together in these large flocks. These have gathered on the edge of the field to exploit all the seeds that are put out there for them. You've got yellowhammers, you've got reed buntings, you've got greenfinches, chaffinches, a really nice mix of birds. Then, of course, we come into spring and the behaviour changes once again. The males set up territory, so the big numbers of birds disperse and form pairs. Like this yellowhammer here, it'll look for a suitable place to nest, it'll find a song perch like this, and then it will sing this wonderful song. Little bit of bread and no cheese, you'll never forget that. The song of a yellowhammer. Skylarks as well. I'm pleased to say there are skylarks here. And skylarks are very different, very drab-looking birds, but of course they're real songsters. But skylarks do it differently. Skylarks fly up towards the heaven, singing constantly. And what would we do without skylarks? So many poems, so many songs written about them. Fantastic birds. But the bad news is, farmland birds are in decline. Why? Well, it's because we demand cheap food. There's a farmland bird index that shows that for 19 species since 1970, the average decline is 56%. Look at that graph. That means that since 1970, we've lost over half of our farmland birds. That is incredibly sad. It's our demand for food. We've ripped up hedgerows, we've drained wetlands, all the small mixed farms have gone, we're using pesticides, we're planting at different times of the year, we've lost the winter stubble. All of these things have affected our wildlife. But how has that affected individual birds? Well, let's have a look. Let's start with the yellowhammer again, one we saw earlier. Look at that, 56% decline in yellowhammers. Let's move on to the skylark. 59% decline in skylarks. That is incredible. That songster will disappear unless we're careful. And worst of all, the turtle dove. A 98% decline. This for me is the bird of summer, the purring of the turtle dove. And if you think about it, since 1970, of 100 turtle doves, we have lost 98%. And finally, the corn bunting. Look at that. 89% decline, a farmland bird that is common and widespread in Portugal and in Spain. It's incredibly sad, but there is some good news. First of all, corn buntings. Corn buntings are on the increase here in Sherborne. Why? Come with me, have a look at this. The wonderful farmer here is called Peter Summers, and Peter has entered his land into the highest tier of an agri-environment scheme, which means that he farms in a much more environmentally friendly way. He's left wide verges here. Look at that, full of ox-eye daisies, full of buttercups, so it's full of seeds, full of invertebrates. This is fabulous for all kinds of wildlife, not just birds. And research recently has shown that 60 farms that entered this agri-environment scheme at the highest level Well, the farmland bird index there is plus 163%. So there is hope for the future. We just need more land in these schemes. Now, there's one farmland bird I haven't mentioned, one of my favourites, the yellow wagtail. It's a bird that I'm not that familiar with in Wales. It's mainly a bird of the south and east of England, and here it is. Look at this bird. Look at the colour on that. Lemon yellow all the way from beak down to tail. The male at the back, the female in the front. She's a little bit more drab. And here they are. They're nesting here at Sherborne. They feed largely in amongst the cornfields, believe it or not. Here's the male. Isn't he a stunner? Just look at that. This was filmed this weekend in bright sunshine when it was at its very best. Lemon yellow, big eyes, good eyesight to look for insects. Watch this male now. Up he jumps, takes that insect out of the air. Isn't that amazing? So they'll take insects from the vegetation, from the air. This is the female jumping up, hovering almost like a kestrel there, head still, looking for insects, and back down again. And then we get the male once more. This amazing bird, look at that. Catches what I think is a flash fly there, batters it, and then he's got a nice morsel, a lovely meal there for him. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? Absolutely stunning birds. But unfortunately, even these birds are showing a decline of 67%. But the good news is that that pair we saw is nesting about 100 metres away in a cornfield, and we've got a camera on that nest. This is what we saw just this weekend. In the corn, down to the bottom, there's the nest, right at the base of the corn. This is the female, a little bit drabber than the male, coming in to feed them with a beak full of insects. There they are. We thought there were 5 chicks, but wait, there's the 6th. 6 chicks in all. And looking at those, I reckon they'll be in that nest for maybe another week or so. The male coming in with food, followed closely afterwards by the female. Here she comes. Isn't that fabulous? Isn't that absolutely brilliant? And the wonderful thing is we'll be able to watch that now over the next week or so, I reckon, before they fledge. Now, I'm spoiling you there, but I have some more lemon-coloured birds for you. Behind me over here, at the base of this hedge, is a yellowhammer's nest, and we can go over to that live because we've got a camera on that nest. There's the nest there. Chris and Michaela, we have a veritable yellow bird fest here in the fields.
A yellow bird fest indeed, and that's another Springwatch first, Jono. We've never had yellowhammer on the programme before, so yellow wagtail and yellowhammer. Let's put that nest in some context now so that we can see exactly where it is. Here are the adult birds in the top of the hedge there. Hedgerows, we've lost loads of hedgerows as well since 1970. Valuable song posts for these birds, of course. That's the female, there's the male, both with food. And if you watch this bird, you'll see it dash across that fabulous margin of peaters there, down into this area where it's not going to be cut, it's not going to be mown, and that's the male feeding the chicks down in the nest. Now, at the moment, they're feeding them a diet of invertebrates. This is what we see for the first few days when they feed those young. They need protein to grow, very obviously. Insect protein, so female coming in as well. And then after a period of time, they switch from insects and they start to feed them a diet of regurgitated grain, seeds that the adults have been eating.
We should see that quite soon, shouldn't we?
We should, in the next couple of days, so they should switch over.
5 days old, maybe?
Fantastic, though. Yellow wag, yellowhammer.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant to have so many yellow birds. But very near that nest, we've got another nest that we were hoping to show you today, and it's the nest of these birds. They're white throats. As you can see, there's one of the birds coming in now. That's the male. Now, these are medium-sized warblers, about the same size as a great tit. You've got the male and the female both coming in and feeding the 5 chicks here. We think they're about 5 to 6 days old, and everything was going extremely well. As I say, very diligent parents, chicks doing everything you would expect them to do, and we were hoping to watch them over the next few days. However, let's go and look at that nest live right now, and as you can see, it's empty. So did they fledge early? Well, no, they didn't. It was a premature eruption, and this is the reason. They scarpered out of that nest because a weasel came. Now, you may have noticed the weasel didn't have any of the chicks. It obviously knew that they were in the nest. The chicks knew the weasel was coming and they scattered. We tried to see if we could see any of those chicks and we couldn't spot any of them. So we're not sure what happened to them. Parents aren't sure either. That's Mum coming in, having a look. Obviously she's a bit confused. She was expecting her chicks to be there. And earlier on you could hear them alarm calling, so they also knew that a predator was around. And they keep coming back. The weasel came back as well to have a look. And there we go, they're coming back with food. They continued to do that for a little while. We weren't sure what that was. We thought that might even be a fecal sac, which made us think that maybe the chicks were still around, but then we decided it wasn't, didn't we?
No, I looked at it in detail. I could see structure inside it. It looked like eggs inside it, maybe a spider's egg sac or something like that. But, you know, I know you always like to look on the bright side, but...
They escaped, come on. They escaped and they're living happily ever after, folks.
I don't think so. I think the weasel put them out. They were only 5 or 6 days old. They've got down onto the ground. The nose of the weasel, I mean, no.
And what we are concerned about is that nest is very close to the yellowhammers, isn't it? And we've seen the weasel quite near the yellowhammer's nest, so we're going to have to keep a close eye out on that and keep our fingers crossed that those chicks
Great to see a weasel, though, because they're an animal that you can, you'll be out here, out and about, you'll never see them. So it's one of the gems of having those cameras on the nest that we see this sort of thing.
I'll tell you what, though, it's drama and jeopardy here at Sherborne, so let's hope it's a little calmer in Fairburn Ings in Yorkshire. That's where Gillian is.
Yes, I'm at the RSPB Reserve at Fairburn Ings. This area is actually right on the border with North and West Yorkshire, and right here we're in West Yorkshire. So now you know exactly where we are. You're going to want to come here because it is tranquil. It is a peaceful, peaceful spot. At this time of year, it's bursting with life. The oxeye daisies are out. It's alive with birdsong. We've had swifts and black-headed gulls feeding behind me, and it really is a beautiful spot. What's even more incredible about it is this was once the heart of mining industry. And behind me is this peaceful scene that I've painted, but this is actually a product of the mining industry. These lakes are quite different from what we saw earlier in the show. We saw slurry pits before. Over here, these are called flashes. And these were formed by the network of tunnels and mine shafts that go as deep as 600 meters. And when those collapsed, the land subsided and these lakes formed. Now, the last flash formed in 1985, and it must have been a really dramatic event because these lakes actually showed up overnight, and that's why they're called flashes. Now, once it all settled down, they became a real magnet for all kinds of wildlife, and especially water birds. The trees that got engulfed by these flashes provided the perfect nesting site for birds like this. Now, this is a cormorant. It's not the familiar coastal Atlantic cormorant that we see here. These are a European subspecies, and they favor these inland nesting sites. The first arrivals arrived here in 2006. There are now 100 pairs of these birds. They're early breeders, so they're already on the nest, and those chicks are quite close to fledging. We also have these beautiful familiar water birds, our herons, and they're here for the fishing, and it's really good fishing. This one is called a small pike there. And like the cormorants, they're also early breeders. They're on the nest there, and we've seen the juvenile like this one here, flapping its wings, exercising its flight muscles, and it's very, very close to fledging. Now, these are familiar birds, but there is some real rarities here. And let's take a look. Now, there it is. It's in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. And there it is. It's not an egret. This is a spoonbill, unmistakable with that spatulate bill. And doesn't it look magnificent in that breeding plumage? The spoonbills, there are only 12 pairs, breeding pairs in the whole country, and this is one of them. And over the last few days, we've had some beautiful views of these birds. They're nesting in the trees that are just behind me and doing rather well. These are beautiful birds and a real testament to just what a wildlife haven this reserve is. Now, the last few days here have been quite emotional for me because it's been such a history here. The mining industry was a tough industry, the miners really struggled, but to see all of this grow up over the remains of that industry, hopefully the community here can enjoy all of this. So we're going to continue this theme tomorrow. We're going to be going to see a machine, a mining machine, that was built on an absolutely colossal scale, but is now also a haven for wildlife. So that is all from us tonight. It's back to Sherborne, to Chris and Michaela.
Thank you, Gillian. I'm looking forward to that. I really like the post-industrial wildlife angle.
Now, at the beginning of the show, we showed you one of the blackbird chicks fledging. Well, we were a bit concerned. We've always been concerned about the proximity between the blackbird nest and the little owl nest. I'm going to show you now live our little owl. And I can tell you that the little owl has caught a bird. Is this our little blackbird?
Well, let's see what happened earlier during the course of the programme. We know that the blackbird had fledged. Here are the adult blackbirds. You remember we saw the blackbird fly out through that barn door. Here are the two owls going berserk, and underneath that piece of wood, on the ground there, is the little owl. But what is it clasping in its feet? Well, no prizes. It's obviously heard, probably, that blackbird. There it is. It's flying in there, carrying the young blackbird. Here's the camera that we've got on the nest, and you can see that
Oh no!
it's brought that blackbird in.
Oh no, my heart breaks for those blackbirds. Gosh.
From that fantastic piece of predation to one of my all-time wildlife heroes and a great British bird artist, none other than Robert Gilmore.
I suppose my passion for natural history started when I was a very small boy. I went to schools where it was encouraged. My grandfather was an artist who specialised in painting birds, and I would watch him in his studio doing painstakingly slow, careful work, which I think obviously impressed me. He tolerated my being in the studio with him when I could have been a perishing nuisance, I suppose. An artist who is tackling natural history obviously needs to get to know his subject. One of my favourite areas for watching wildlife and drawing them, of course, is where I now live, in North Norfolk. The sort of birds that one finds on the coast here at Cly and Titchwell are just the birds that I like to see and draw. And so it's not at all surprising that this is where I've ended up. Drawing is at the basis of all good art, I think. To be able to interpret what one is seeing, it's not necessarily vital to be drawing in a precise photographic sort of style, as long as the drawing understands the character of what is being drawn. The whole thing is a very monochrome view, but it's very decorative, and the group of birds makes an abstract pattern of black and white shapes against this rather grey water. I was lucky in having a fairly good natural aptitude. Some of the things I did early on I look at now with a fair degree of horror. From my earliest days, I've always been interested in the work of wildlife artists, but it was extremely difficult to to see original works of art by the artists who one admired. I was working very closely with Eric Enyon and one or two others, and we got together and started plotting a society. The result was that in 1964, the first exhibition, Society of Wildlife Artists, opened in London. We've been going from strength to strength ever since. I used to do quite a lot of odd jobs for the RSPB when it was just 2 or 3 people in a tiny office in London. And the Society decided to have a logo, and at that time it was just another job. We didn't sort of think of it in any great sense that it was going to become an iconic image, instantly recognisable. I like to tackle a new challenge every now and again, and the series of jackets that I do for the New Naturalist series provides this regularly, because I'm never sure what's going to come up. I think I've just done the 67th or something. The sort of work I do in printmaking means that birds like avocets, oystercatchers, ring plovers, with their bold, simple plumage, are ideal for the media that I use. But I do, in any case, like long-legged wading birds as a whole. They stand around very often in groups, which appeals to me. I just find them more fun to work with than fussy little brown jobs that sit in twiggy bushes that just aren't at all suited to my style. My life has been exceedingly fortunate in that I've been able to spend it doing what I love doing most. I can't actually think of anything else I could have done, really, but I shall continue to press on until the cutter drops from my hand, I suppose.
I think the key to Robert's success is the simplicity, the way he captures the bird's form in so few panels. Look at this Barnell.
Absolutely fabulous. But
And
I
he's
must
a
say,
lovely bloke as well.
I'm still getting over the drama of the little owl predating our blackbird chick. So quick look at the live nest. There it is. 3 chicks still there. Fingers crossed for them. We'll keep a close eye on them. Let's hope they fledge successfully. That's all we've got time for tonight. Tomorrow it will be part 2 of Lord of the Wings. Which one of these fabulous birds will reign supreme?
I'll be introducing yet another new bird, and this one is a real stonker.
And do join us for the fledging of the Mandarin ducks. I'm going to put £100 of the Queen's sterling on these fledging tomorrow, so do join us. Maddie Moat will be on at 1:30. You can look at that on our website and also on the red button, and of course all of our cameras as well.
Bye-bye.